All right, and I'm just trying to figure out my windows so that I can see the chat, so that I can see my notes. All good stuff. All right, well, welcome, everybody. Brave for you all for trying a hybrid meeting. I'm a user group leader, and we are either virtual or in person because hybrid just feels really daunting, but y'all are doing it so well, and so I'm excited that you can make that happen for you so that people can join wherever they're coming in from. So this is 5 habits that will make or break your Salesforce admin journey. And I am actually presenting this next week at Florida Dreamin'. And so when you reached out, I was like, I would be happy to give this as like a first run to both give you a sneak peek and hopefully get some feedback from you all at the end, if you'd be so kind. I do have these slides. I will put this in the chat too. I believe that I shared them properly yesterday, and you will see that this is a Florida Dreamin' hashtag or tag on there. You can also use the QR code. I like to drop lots of resources in my slides, and so hopefully you can get links and things there later. And again, I can always drop this back in the chat or come back to this slide later. So my name is Cassie Supilowski. I am based out of Chicago. I am the Managing Director of Salesforce and Product Solutions at a nonprofit called One Goal. We work in sort of bridging the gap between K-12 and higher ed. That is a QR code for my LinkedIn. I have a lengthy, deep inbox there. So if you leave a note to say, hey, I joined the user group, I saw your session, whatever it is, just let me know so that I can sort that out of all of the other requests I have on there. As you mentioned, I'm a Salesforce MVP. And I've been doing the Salesforce thing for about 11 years, all at One Goal. So I've been there for just over 11 years. And so I've learned a lot along the way. I've got 14 certifications, and I present a lot at events, at user groups. It's something I really enjoy. And like I mentioned, I also co-lead our Chicago nonprofit user group. So we also try to meet monthly, again, virtual or in person. So I would love to see in the chat, and I'll see if I can see hands in the room we got a little glimpse of some of our newer folks here. How many folks would identify as new to the ecosystem and like seeking out an admin role? Anyone new and trying to get into their first admin role?
Not a first, but
one hand raised there.
Like,
all right.
I don't think she can see me.
Oh,
yeah. Hi, Casey. I'm not new to the ecosystem, but I'm actively looking for opportunities at the moment.
Great.
So,
yeah. How about anyone who's in an admin role or admin-like role, maybe BA, maybe end user or some power user, and maybe you've been in your role for like 1 or 2 years?
3.
Yeah, say 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Excuse me. Anyone more than 5 years in an admin role? And then, yep, see some hands. And then anyone here who's like Salesforce, but not really admin side. I'm an end user, I'm a developer, I'm an architect, or I'm just here for fun. Cool. So yes, obviously this is geared towards admin because that's what I grew up in the ecosystem as. But I hope that there is something that either you can take away from whatever role you're in, or maybe you can share with someone you know who's in their admin role. So that is super helpful just to kind of know who's here. So I always like to start my sessions with like, why did I pick this to talk about? This is the first time I'm doing this session. I mentioned I've been doing this for 11 years. And in 11 years, I can tell you I've learned a lot. Most of that through making some mistakes. And doing things the wrong way, or looking back and saying, I wish I had X, Y, and Z when I was in my first, second, third, fourth, fifth year as an admin. Like I said, I've been at One Goal in my whole experience as an admin. We're a nonprofit, and so that also means we're typically doing things a little scrappy, and I'm figuring things out for the first time for my team. I now manage a team of Salesforce admin. We are mostly declarative. We don't have any developers in-house. And so I just found there was things that I was always kind of on a soapbox about, either things that I think that Salesforce needs to train admins on better, or again, those things that I wish I knew better about when I was starting, or those things that I find myself frequently coaching my team on or frequently telling other people about. And so it's also just, it's being a brand new admin or doing this and learning new things is exciting, but it can be really overwhelming too. And so I think the ecosystem has changed a lot. And what it looks like to be an admin nowadays looks very different than it did when I started 11 years ago. And someone basically just threw Salesforce at me when I said, I will take that data coordinator job. And so I want to make sure that folks have some guidelines. And again, these are the things that have helped me. There are lots of resources out there, and I'm sure lots of other things. I know lots of other things that are important in the admin world and in the Salesforce world. But these are the things that come back to resurface for me time and time again. So just a quick look at what we'll look at today. So we'll do a little bit more introduction and framing. Not going to hide anything here. Here's our habits. So understanding the why and when to say no, which is a lot. Documenting everything, testing and managing your changes carefully, taking ownership of your org, and keep learning and build your network. So starting with one, understand the why and when to say no. So you are going to get requests, and most of you, if you're in these roles, you do get requests fast and furious. They come in from everywhere, and they are not all equal. Depending on if you're new to your org, or Salesforce is new to your org, or if you're taking over an org, there might be habits that you need to break from your end users, and maybe they're just used to inundating their Salesforce team with requests and getting a yes to those requests. And if that is your scenario, that is your situation, it's number one for a reason, that is something to get ahead of. It's really easy for admin, especially if you're in a more junior role, or maybe you're not in a leadership, or again, you're seen as like a person who just gets things done, to feel pressured to say yes to everything. And so making sure that you're thinking about both how you're understanding what folks need, when they need it, why they need it, and being able to have that conversation with them, and thinking about how to get them to tell you the information that you need. So I always start this one with saying, you have to have a system for requests. If you don't, again, this is the reason, this is number one of number one, you have to make a system, because many of our lives look like this. We have a calendar of some sort. We have things in Salesforce coming our way. We've got Slack, we've got Teams, we've got Meet, we've got our mail inbox. We have that person who says, hey, hi, how are you? And really they have something that they need from you. All of these things that are like, hey, do you just have a quick minute? And that quick minute is actually a request that would take 3 months to implement. And so this is the first thing. If you don't already have it, make sure you have it in place. Think about what this looks like. It can be building out in cases. It can be a Google form. It can be maybe you ask your IT team, if that's not you, for a special inbox where people can just send emails to that. But it is not one coming from multiple places. It is not coming in without some sort of template. And it is not coming in with the expectation that the answer is yes, and the answer is right now. So that is, I think, that was one of the first things I did, and one of the first things I tell people is that however you can get organized around this is the first thing that you should do to help calm the chaos and figure out, okay, what's actually coming in, and it's the first step in starting to prioritize your work. And I really mean this. If you are not here, if you and your team are not here, this is the first thing that you should go do. Do not think about anything else until you start to think about what it looks like to have a system for your requests. And then the next step is to use that system. So if we use cases, and I still, however many years we've probably had a custom case flow for, I don't know, I've been there for 11 years, probably at least for 8. I still find myself responding to people in Slack. Great question. Can you go ahead and submit that as a case? And you have to also have the commitment to do that, because if you start responding to people in the Slack message, in the G chat, in the email, then they're going to say, oh, we don't really need to follow that protocol. And it's a real slippery slope to ending up in that chaos again, where you're just being dragged in every direction. So you have to actually be able to use the system that you're designing and build that habit not only for yourself, but model that habit for others to say, nope, this is how we get the information. And you can convey that in a lot of ways. You can get your leadership to help convey that. You can say, hey, you know what, like, me, I have a team. I can say, I want to make sure that my whole team has eyes on your request, because it's so important that we should all know what's going on. And secretly, I just really want them to not expect that I'm going to respond to them right away. You can also say, hey, this is helpful for documentation and history, so I can see if we get the same request again. which it is. And also it's going to help them understand that you're not going to respond to them right away from your GChat or your Slack message. So there's all different ways that you can help communicate this, but I do think that this is really the foundation as an admin and as a team that is taking requests from users. It's that your users know and that you know how and where and when those requests are coming in. And then the second part of this is coaching users to state their problem. Often users want to tell us what the solution is. They say, I just need a field that is a pick list that says upsell, renewal, downscope, or lapsed. And that's not actually what they mean. They're trying to take the things that they already know and then help you out. They think that they're doing the solutioning for you. So one thing I'm often reminding my team of is like, your job is to tell me your problem. My job is to find the solution. I hear people say, well, I don't know what Salesforce can do. And I say, you don't have to know what Salesforce can do. That is my job to know what Salesforce can do. Or better yet, I don't know everything Salesforce can do, but if you tell me your problem, I can find out if Salesforce can solve that. And so I want to actually pause and do a little exercise. So if you have a pen and paper, or if you have a little whiteboard on your screen, or however, I would love for you, if you have something to visualize with, draw a vase. If you can't draw a vase, maybe just picture one. Just think about this for a couple seconds. If I say, I'm giving you a directive, I'm saying, draw or picture a vase. That's your guideline there. All right, we'll do this real quick. Show of hands or drop in the chat. How many folks had something that looked like this?
Right?
There's lots of different vases, but our immediate thought is, yeah, like just give me a vase. This is pretty standard. It's where our brain goes. It's what we know, right? We know vases. We know when you get them from the florist or you bring them home or whatever it might be, it's probably something that looks like this, right? That's pretty straightforward. We're using the context we know, and we were told, draw a vase. So I drew a vase. Now, again, if you have paper or a whiteboard or anything, if not, make this a thought exercise. I would love you to think about how to draw or picture a better way to enjoy flowers in your home. If my directive is draw or picture a better way to enjoy flowers in your home. I'll give you a little bit more time because there's a little bit more to think about here. Get creative.
Are we talking Costco flowers or flowers? Yeah,
I can't hear room audio really well, and so I don't know if you want to type in the chat if anyone has anything, or I know there might also just be like side conversation going on too, so that's okay. And if you're online, if you want to go ahead and start to drop in the chat, like if you drew something or what you were thinking of, if you have any examples, or if someone in the room wants to shout out real loud what your thing was that was a better way to enjoy flowers in your home. If not, I'll reveal the secret behind the curtain. So you might have, and just fair warning, I stole this from, I was at Dreamforce last week. I stole this from a session in there. I've probably told 10 people about it. This activity blew my mind away because this is what I think I need to do with my users more often. So I just threw it right in here. So if I say draw or picture a better way to enjoy flowers in your home, you might say, all right, well, maybe I have a painting of flowers, or maybe I have hanging flowers, or I've got a potted orchid. Maybe I have one of those fancy frame TVs that actually just has some pictures rotating. Maybe I've got some hanging, or you know what, I have allergies, so I have paper flowers. Or I want something that's gonna last for a long time that I don't have to take care of. I'm gonna have some glass flowers. Wouldn't recommend glass flowers if you have cats because they're probably gonna knock them off the table. Or maybe you want a tiny greenhouse in your home, right? These are all, yeah, dried inside of a shoebox. Great, I didn't even think about that, Lisa. This, again, thinking about the question behind the question when I said draw a vase might have been, I actually just really want to enjoy flowers in my home. But if you're not prompting your users to say, give me the value that you're hoping to get out of the solution, what do you really need? Then they're gonna say, I just need a vase. They don't need a vase. They want a potted plant, or they need some hanging flowers, or they have severe allergies, or they've got cats, or they've got, all of those extra criteria. And so I think this is a great exercise to do with your users if you'd like. But to help get a point, get across the point that like we really need to understand the sort of the question behind the question. And it's our job, whether you're a business, if you have been a business analyst, that's great. Our admin act as business analysts. But even if you're in other roles, these are the kinds of things we need to think about to prompt our users to tell us what they really need, because without that, we can't get to the next part, which is starting to understand how to prioritize things. If we don't really know what they want and the impact of those things, we can't start to make a decision around what should we do and what should we not. So some decision criteria to think about is it a good idea? Sometimes we have to just use that filter and be like, that's actually a really bad idea, and find a delicate way to tell our users that. One that we often get, especially I feel like in fundraising, is, oh, when this field equals X, email all these people. And I'm like, do you really? Are you sure about that? You really want no human interaction and like purview over like sending out maybe hundreds, if not thousands of email because the field equals true? Like, I think maybe we should revisit, what do you really need from that? So sometimes you do have to have that base layer of just like, is this a good idea? And more often than not, it's actually getting to like, what's the underlying request behind it? It's not usually a bad idea. It's just that they're maybe not articulating it in a way that is leading to a solution that's good. Is this related to org-wide outcomes? If it's not, then should it be a priority? How many users does it impact? We think about, does it impact our students, our teachers, our staff, our funders? I can tell you right now that if it's going to impact our teachers or our students, it's probably going to be much higher on the list than if it makes something better for our staff. That's just the nature of the beast. Our customers, quote unquote, are our students and our teachers and our fundraisers. And so they're going to get first priority when we're looking at what kind of work we should be doing. Is there a workaround? This is something else we think about a lot. Something that is broken versus something that needs to be built for the first time versus something that is an enhancement are different levels of priority. If there's a way to do something with maybe one more click versus there's a bug in the system, we're going to answer that bug first. And so thinking about how you might also categorize requests, but also making sure that you're understanding like what is, again, this goes back to what is this solving for? Is it solving for something that is fundamentally broken or just does not exist? Or is it just solving for something that people are a little bit annoyed about, but maybe could live with that annoyance for another 3 months? And then another thing that every quarter we go through the things on our plate and we say, is this a must, a should, or could? We actually have a won't usually, but we got to the point where the won'ts just don't even end up in our quarterly review. And so we then can tell our end users, like, this is on our must list because of all of these other pieces of information we have. And so it's going to get done first. Once the must things are done, then we'll move to the should. And if we've got time, we'll do the could. And if the should and the could don't get addressed, we'll review and see if that falls into the next quarter. Or does it get pushed off, or does it fall into the backlog? So thinking about how you're prioritizing this work. And right now, or for a short time, like this may be on you and your team as a Salesforce team. The goal would be, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, is that this is not your team deciding these things, that you're actually getting all of the information and then having all of your stakeholders decide together for the organization what should be done. So governance and things like that. Again, we'll touch on that a little bit later. So also thinking about, how do you say no to something? Or also saying no is also delaying the yes. So you can ask, what if we could only deliver 60% of this request? So I can build a version that covers your main use case this week, and then we can see if that works, and we can build out a little bit more in the next quarter, or the next month, or the next week, whenever that timeline might be. What if I can do, what if I can take it from 5 clicks to 3 instead of 5 clicks to 1? Is that still a win for you? Being clear on like, this is what it's going to take to make this happen. So I either need to take something else off of my team, my Salesforce team's plate, because of the amount of work this takes. Or this is what I need from your team, end user. I need your team to meet with me 30 minutes every week for the next month to give me requirements and give feedback. I can't build this unless I have someone to test it. Can you give me that in order to build this? Because it's a two-sided thing. I can't build something that I'm not getting feedback on. And if sometimes their answer is, what? No, I don't have time for that. And you say, well, I don't have time for that either then. What happens if I don't deliver this on X date? So it's due December 1st. What if it doesn't happen until December 15th? Or let's push it after the holidays. What's the worst thing that can happen? So in our world, the two examples I always give are like, is there a $10 million grant on the table? And is a student actively trying to enroll in classes right now? If those two things are not true, or neither of those is true, then it's probably not as urgent as we think, and there's probably some flexibility in the timeline. And then a really great one is, that's a great idea. I would love to work on that in the future. Let's add it to the backlog because I can see that right now my team doesn't have the capacity to do that. Or maybe it's not a top priority, and end user, can you go get folks to decide if this is a priority? And if you tell me it is, then we can rearrange things. And so I think part of this is also just clarity with your end users about what your example, what your current plate looks like for your team. So again, saying no, but also it's a delaying the yes. Few things are like a no forever, unless they're a terrible idea. But how do you just give yourself more time, gather more requirements, figure out the real problem? All right, that was our first one, biggest one, most important, longest one. Habit number 2 is a very close second, document everything. And I mean everything. The number of times that I, 11 years later, go back to something and I'm like, oh man, why did we do this? And I go back to find out that I say, why did we do this? I mean, why did I do this? Because I made a change and I did not document why I did it. And I have no idea why I did it in 2016, because that was a very long time ago. And so thinking about all of the ways in which you can document information, and that is both for you and for your end users. So when I think about documentation, I think about them sort of within these buckets. There's inside of Salesforce, so help text and description fields. Those are a win for everybody. Your end users can use them as they're filling things out. You get to use them because you have a history of why you built something in there. In-app guidance, if you want to use it. We don't use that a ton, but I know that has come in handy for a lot of folks. So it's kind of sort of a version of documentation. Troubleshooting and FAQs. Every organization has that set of questions that you were just asked again and again and again and again. And it's the same thing and it's the same answer every time. And so those frequently asked questions get their own one-pager where it's question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And every time you get asked that question again, you just send the document. And that's the beauty of having the document, because you can say, hey, I've already been asked this 1,000 times. For the 1,001 time, here's the answer. It's right there. Very little work from you because it already exists because you already documented it. And user instructions is a good one. So how should someone actually be using the system? What's the documentation for the various parts of your Salesforce instance? Internal documentation for your own team. So we have documentation around, again, how did we build something? Why did we build something? If I go on vacation for 2 weeks, my team can look at a document that says, oh, this is how and why we do this if someone has a question. We also have it for things like, what's our testing checklist? What's our deployment checklist? We'll talk about that a little bit later too. What are all the things we need to know? What are the things that we agree on as a team? And then thinking about technical changes as well. So what you did and why. So, and what you didn't do. Because there's inevitably, again, after 11 years in an org, I can tell you the same questions come up every few years. And instead of going like, I wonder if we should do that, you can go back to your documentation and say, this is why we didn't do it 3 years ago. Has anything changed that would make us do it now? So that you're not having those conversations over and over again. Or again, if you're not in your org for 11 years, somebody else isn't doing that same kind of footwork over and over and over again. So we use Jira. You can use Asana, Google Sheets, anything you want for documenting technical changes. Same thing goes for troubleshooting FAQs, any sort of instructions, like maybe use Confluence, maybe use Google Docs, maybe use whatever your system is at your organization. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be Salesforce knowledge. It can be. But the goal is to make sure that any of your documentation is easily accessible. And I always say that documentation starts when the project starts. So blank bullets and half thoughts on a page are much better than a blank page. And in the world of AI, I am now often finding myself just turning on the little microphone and talking into Gemini and saying, here's all the thoughts, here's all the things, here's all the instructions, and getting that version 1 of my documentation, and then going back in with my expertise and honing and making it better. And with tracking your changes, the idea is to make your changes visible, make them repeatable. Again, so we're not building, we're not reinventing the wheel, and make sure that you can explain them later. With our technical changes, I often say to my team, like in Jira, if something related to this piece of work came up later, someone should be able to come back to that Jira ticket and know what you did. they should be able to say, oh, this is what changed. This is why they changed it. This is what I would have to change to meet this future requirement. And so again, it's making sure that you have that for your future self, for your future team members. And sometimes future is 3 weeks from now, and sometimes future is 3 years from now. So we actually used to.
I have a quick comment on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my comments will be like, I feel like based on my experience, like creating and also maintain document is a full-time job. And so I don't know, like in my previous work, like I feel like always like just keep a document up to date is really challenge based on depends on how complex your team is and the turnover rate like based on team. So one experience I have is like just your in your notes here, like help task and description. I think that is something the least I feel like easier to do is like for everything in Salesforce you created, whatever, even it's a flow, even it's a validation rule, whatever, right? Some complex solution, at least put a Jira user story number there. You know, don't make it blank. Even like people trying to say like, okay, I want to put a more like a truly like a explanation in there, but probably I will say put a Jira story number there. You know, much more easier to find more context than based because like someone like translated this user story into a short text may not be 100% accurate. Yeah, just my comments. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we do because we use Jira. Anytime a Jira ticket relates to a field, that field description and help text, because we actually just use the same for both because of how we set up our data dictionary. Anyways, it has every Jira ticket that is related to it. And so, yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And then the other thing we do as far as I agree, like keeping documentation, getting documentation started is one thing, keeping it updated is a whole nother. And so one thing we actually encourage our users to do is to, like, we use Google Docs. We say, like, if something is no longer accurate, like you are in the system every single day and you're like, this field no longer has this thing, like they will comment on there. And obviously that's not the ideal way to keep our documentation updated. And that's not the only way it's staying updated, but we also encourage our users to play a role in that, or if things aren't clear. And then one thing we did last year was, it is a full-time job. And so we actually just our team took one day where we sat down. I was able to extract all of our instruction documents because we keep them in one folder for the organization. I pulled them out all into a Google sheet that had the link, and it had, I think, the date that it was created, date it was last modified. And we went row by row through every single piece of documentation and marked for whether it was like just no longer relevant and should just be deleted. Does it need some updates? Does it need major updates? Like, what level of quality is it? And then so we started with that one day, just went through everything. And then over the next quarter, everyone took some and actually went and updated them. So we recorded some new videos that were more updated. We reviewed to make sure things were still relevant. We deleted things that weren't relevant. And so again, it is a long-term thing. It's not just like create it and forget it. And so I think it's important to have a process for that too. But to the technical changes point, if you don't have Jira or some sort of fancy tool, one thing we created in the past was actually a custom object inside of Salesforce. So you can see it's called System Change. This was very, very long ago. You can see the release date on this one is 2017. But this is similar to the fields we have in Jira now. It's, what's the description of the change? What's the actual configuration details? And I didn't go grab the best version of one. I literally just grabbed one record and put it on here. We connected it to the case because that's how we're getting requests from our end users. You can see the type of change, hours allocated, which I don't think we use consistently, testing evidence, which again, we'll touch on in a little bit, end user instructions. And so again, if you don't have something, this is, it's not a massive object. You could build this out for yourself inside of Salesforce, and then you could reference it if you're using something like cases. But like I said, like a Google Sheet gets the job done too. And so just, again, any documentation is better than no documentation is usually my general rule. And again, it benefits everybody. So your end users feel empowered to get their work done. They have resources that they can access as needed. It reduces the cases and the requests that they have to submit, and therefore the cases and requests that you have to respond to when they can just access the information they need on an as needed basis. You don't have to reinvent the wheel because you know what and why you did something. I love when I can find a receipt where someone's like, this thing isn't working. And I can say, actually, this is working as described. Here's documentation for it. Or they're like, I can't find blah, blah, blah. Or there's no instructions for this, to be able to give them that. Or to say, this isn't what this also goes to the gathering requirements from your end users. Like, this isn't what I described. And say, well, this isn't, the requirements doc that we agreed upon. So overall, this helps everyone be more efficient. We also use this, going back to the first part of the system, you have to gather requests. We use our documentation in our case workflow. So you can see here, depending on what fields they're filling out, I'm dropping in conditional sections that are giving you those links to some of our troubleshooting and FAQs. And then on our second page, we're using some of those high frequency words to say, okay, based on the kind of support you need or the description you're giving, I'm actually going to have these little blue links that are showing up in here at various points. Review the instructions here. Did you check this out? Try doing this Learn Track module. Have you done X, Y, and Z, et cetera, et cetera. And so again, leveraging your resources and documentation to put in front of your end users wherever you can to avoid them even having to click submit here. Because again, a lot of those questions come up over and over again, which is the point being made, like there's a lot of turnover. And so people don't know that these things exist yet. And so if you can just get them right in front of them, then that's even better. So, all right. Habit number 3, test and manage changes carefully. This is one that I have felt more strongly about, as I think some of the resources that are just lacking in the admin world in general. There's just not a lot of documentation or content around testing and managing changes. So you could also call this, don't be the admin who breaks production. So if I try to think about, in the broader Salesforce ecosystem, those of you who are developers or architects know that you cannot write code directly in production for Salesforce. You just can't access it. You have to write that code in a sandbox, and you have to push it through some sort of mechanism to go to production. And on top of that, you have to have 75% test coverage. And that is true for every single piece of code that is written in Salesforce, minus maybe a few exceptions that developers know about that I don't. And I think that same criteria should apply to our admin as well. We should be thinking about the work that we build declaratively with the same kind of care and caution to make sure that it works before we release it. In life, you measure twice and cut once, right? I'm not going to nail a hole in my wall until I know that is at the right spot. My husband doesn't agree. We've got a lot of holes in our wall, but you measure twice, you cut once, right? And that's the same kind of philosophy for building out, whether it's a flow or a field or a validation rule. Make sure it works, make sure it fits before you're giving it to your end users. So I believe in this so much that I actually have 2 separate other presentations about using sandboxes and about testing your work. And so those are linked in here and should be accessible because they're from previous presentations, so they should already be shared. So I won't go into them in a ton of detail. But like I said, this is one place where for me, I felt this. I felt like anytime I was making changes, it was risky and it was stressful because I was doing it in production because I didn't know any better. No one told us any better. And we were like, oh, it's just this, it's just that, it's not code, it's really small, it's really simple. I can just do this in production. Or maybe I do it in a sandbox and then I don't test it as robustly. And so again, all of these things, if you're making mistakes in production, if you're breaking production, it can lead to data loss, broken automation, unhappy users, unhappy admin. The idea is that you want to make sure that things are working and you're finding what works and what doesn't before anyone else sees it, or you're even better engaging people in that testing process so that they can tell you if it works according to what their requirements were to begin with. Your testing is not going to be perfect, but you can get as close to it as possible. And so again, if you want to dig in more to either of those topics, I do have presentations on them. I probably have recordings for them someplace too. But the idea that, again, just because there's no hard-coded parameters from Salesforce saying you have to use a sandbox and you have to have certain test coverage, I think we should still be considering that as admin, just as developers do every day. And so once you're building a sandbox and then you're testing those things, also thinking about how are you actually going to move that between your environments. So that's called a deployment. If all of these words are new to you, that's fine. Again, check out the resources. The most important thing is like, think about this and make sure it's top of mind for you. So again, I mentioned for going back to documentation, we have a documentation checklist. A deployment checklist. So the things, we still use change sets. They work for us. They work for us for now. So I think they're fine. They're not perfect. They're not the best. I'll talk about some other tools in a second. But we say, like, here's all the things that should be true when you're deploying with a change set. Here are the quirks to consider. If you're deploying this, consider this. Just a few weeks ago, I deployed a report type and it completely broke on me. And I was like, oh my gosh, have I just been like away from technical stuff for too long? Did I really just mess something up here? And it turns out it's a weird one-off quirk that sometimes happens with change sets. My contacts and activities reports, the activities just fell off of it. So my my contacts and activities report just turned into contacts. And now I know that. And I will probably never move report types again without checking that all of my information for my report type came over. I often say to my team with, documentation and with testing, the ecosystem is constantly evolving. There's always more technology. We're always learning. We're never going to be able to avoid mistakes completely, but we really shouldn't be making the same mistake twice. Right? You learn from it, you document it, you know it, and you don't do that again. And that's why we also share it with one another so that our teammates don't make the same mistakes. And then choosing a deployment tool. So like I said, we use change sets. There's lots of other things out there. DevOps Center is within Salesforce. I would say if you're starting net new, DevOps is a great place to start. DevOps Center is a great place to start. If you've got a budget, GearSet and Capado are great. I haven't used those like for my day job, but I've heard great things about them. So you don't have a process yet for moving your changes. These are the kinds of things to look into. And then thinking about what your definition of done is for your team and for yourself. So I would argue that definition of done means that documentation has been created. So kind of pulling all of these things together. If you're saying this ticket, this request that I got is done, for us, that means that there's documentation. There's been communication, it's been tested, it has gone through our pipeline, all of these things that we've built up over time. So for you, it might not be that robust. If you're a new admin, you're a new org, you might be building these things out, and that definition of done should sort of become more robust over time. And like I said, don't forget to document your changes. So things like GearSet, I think actually all three of these will do some change tracking for you, but that also doesn't tell you the why. And so I do still think you need to find a place to be able to document like why you built something or how you built it, what you tested, all of those things. So again, there's lots more resources about testing in sandboxes that I can share, or I have shared in those two presentations if you want to check those out. Again, I could go on and on about these things, but I think the headline is, this is something admins need to think about. And it's so important that it was in my narrowed down list of 5 things. And the reality is every admin has had a moment that they'd like to forget. And testing, having good protocols, having good documentation helps make those scenarios more rare so that we're not constantly like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Or like, how many extra hours did I spend doing this thing? All right, habit number 4, take ownership of your org. And so there's sort of also a progression here. We're starting by just like making sure we're getting the requirements and requests in a way that makes sense and is easy to follow. We're making sure that our end users are giving us really robust requirements. We are documenting those things. We are testing and releasing those things. And now we can kind of move on to say like, you know what? It's not just about the request that I'm getting. I'm no longer just a custodian of my environment. I need to be a champion for my environment. So this is about thinking about shifting from being a reactive admin to a strategic owner of your org. And so a couple of things I think about to break this down is thinking long-term. So planning ahead, planning about using sandboxes, releases, data strategy. What does it look like long-term? Can you actually plan not request by request or case by case? Can you actually help plan a quarter or a year out or build a roadmap? And again, sometimes this varies based on what your team looks like. Maybe you have somebody, maybe your manager or your team leader does these kinds of things, but you can start to give insight on those things and take on this sort of mindset about what it means to take ownership of your org. Setting the standards, naming conventions, security, automation structure. So how do you build your automation? And then being an advocate for best practices, even when it's unpopular. So you just heard me talk about testing and sandboxes. Probably about 5-6 years ago, I was the one on my team who had to say, hey, everybody, we're going to start using sandboxes like with fidelity. We're really doing this. And a team member who I've worked with for a long time was like, you want me to build it over here and then move it here and test it and then come over here? Like, that's going to take me so much longer. And I said, yes, it is. But we are going to gain that back by not having bugs, by having happy end users, by following best practices. They eventually got on board. And now we have really great DevOps processes for where we're at. But sometimes you have to do the unpopular thing. Sometimes you have to say no to the thing because it's a bad idea, or say no to the thing because it's not the right priority for your org right now. And so, thinking about, I also kind of think about this of like your org, your team, your environment that you're working in shouldn't be something that you're embarrassed about. You shouldn't be like, oh, please don't look at how many custom objects or custom fields we have on our contact record, right? I think now also thinking about being an advocate and setting standards, security needs to be top of mind for everybody. And maybe you have a separate security team, but it's also your job to understand how security works within your org. And so thinking about your org a little bit more holistically, not just request by request. And so a couple of areas to think about, you heard me mention governance earlier, thinking about the clear processes for changes, access, and approvals. So in a perfect world, like I said, you're not the one making the decisions about what gets done and what doesn't. You're giving the information about how much capacity it takes, how long it's going to take, the size, all of that. But you have gathered the requirements so that your org can do that. So your team leads, your chiefs of staff, whoever it might be, lots of orgs have a governance team. Thinking about the data quality in your org. So again, validation rules, doing some regular audits, having data cleaning dashboards, duplicate management, things like that. I mentioned security, make sure you're following the principle of least privilege. What does MFA look like? Permission sets, implementation and management, sustainability. This is one of the key words that I'm always talking about when someone brings something our way. We're always thinking about what's the sustainable way to build this? How do we build this such that it's still viable in 3 to 5 years for our organization, or it is malleable? And I have some resources later for well architected, but maybe our programs change, but this isn't so complicated or so convoluted that we can't change it, that we can't modify it so that it's small iterations, not something we have to break down and completely rebuild. If there was one on here that I feel that it's, little recency bias, this is something that I have been asking for years, is saying my team should not be the ones that are deciding what we are and are not doing. And just this year, probably been asking for it for like 6, 7, 8 years. Just this year, we're starting the process for actually having governance. And unfortunately, it came out of necessity. We had a pretty big layoff. I lost about almost half of my team on the Salesforce side in May. And so I said, we can't get everything done. And so we had a process where we had everyone give us everything they would want for this year. And my VP that manages our team and our chiefs got together and said, yep, these are the things that we're doing based on the priority, the need, the impact, the how many people, how many users will, get benefit from it, all of that. And then they came back to us and said, this is what you're working on based on the capacity that your team has. And so again, I think that's the perfect world. And I think it takes a long time to get there. Data quality is a little more within your own arena. You can build out some dashboards, you can build out some validation rules, but the governance is a little bit of managing up if your organization doesn't already have it. So that's one I would flag. So how do we get from being, or what does it look like from being an admin to being a strategic champion or having a champion mindset? It goes from things like fixing issues as they come in, which is maybe where you're starting or maybe where you will start or maybe you have started, to preventing them through planning. You have learned enough, you have tested enough, you are in tune enough with your end users that you can say, okay, I think these are the things that we need to start thinking about in the future. You go from saying yes to every request to actually evaluating those requests by impact. So again, early on, you may feel pressure to say yes, I'll get it done. Yes, I'll get it done. Yes, I'll get it done. To actually saying, you know what, is this the right thing to be doing right now? And maybe leaning into that governance process if you have it. If not, starting to coach people or use that sort of language around them. You go from building fast to building for the future. So building fast means sometimes building in production, which never ever do that. But building for the future means you're testing, you're building in a sandbox, you're thinking about sustainability. And so I think that is sort of the mindset, again, that sort of comes with hopefully things you can learn without having to go through 11 years of being an admin and making a lot of mistakes and messing a lot of things up. And last, which I think you all are already a little in tune with because you're here, you're at a user group meeting, you're showing up, whether you're online or you're in person. The biggest thing I think to wrap this all up is to keep learning and building your network. I mentioned before, Salesforce as an ecosystem and as a technology is evolving constantly, and you cannot keep up alone. You need to always be learning, you need to be getting support from others, and you need to be supporting others. So first, never miss release notes. Even if you think there's nothing in there that impacts you, check out the release notes, and with that, the release updates. Sometimes there's mandated things from Salesforce that you need to do. Those are a great way to stay in tune with the technology. Even if you're not implementing something that's new from there, you can at least be aware that it's available so that when you get a question about it later, you know what you have access to. Trailhead, certifications, blogs, podcasts. There's other classes you can take. There's there's all sorts of things. There's no shortage of information to stay up to date and to keep learning inside of Salesforce. And then, like I said, being an admin nowadays is not the same as it used to be. And so making sure that we're staying in tune with what's going on. Again, I'm further stepped back. I'm more in a leadership role now. And even then, I'm still trying to keep my hands on the keyboard when I can, on the back end, stepping away when I know I shouldn't be touching it. But I'm reading those release notes, I'm staying up to date so that I can step in and I know how to set those guidelines and best practices for my team. User groups, you all are here. If you haven't seen it, I think there's a great page where you can kind of go look at a calendar of all of the upcoming events and whether they're virtual or in person, if they're near you. And Ohana Slack, if you're not in Ohana Slack, it is sort of a new and community-driven version of the Trailblazer community that's online. It's where I go to ask questions. It's where I go to answer questions. There's all sorts of channels in there. I think the Trailblazer community might actually be moving there in the future. I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like I've heard people talk about that, or maybe that's just a wish list item. Community events. So I know True North Dreamin' is happening up in Toronto next year. Again, I'm going to Florida Dreamin' next week. You've got world tours in various places. There's one in New York and in Chicago in December. They happen all over the place. And then Community Sprints is sort of like a hackathon. It's on the Salesforce.org side, but it's free. It's a great way to stay connected. It's a great way to get your hands on maybe something that is new to you. And so again, I think making sure that we're thinking about what that means for you and how to stay up to date with everything. So I would love for you to take a moment and just jot down one resource or group or something that you'll check out or look into. Maybe it's something you're like, oh, I really need to learn Flow. Set a reminder that says I need to go find some resources for Flow. Feel free to just think about that for a minute, because I do think that this is kind of how we stay up to date and make sure we're building those all of these habits along through. And if you're in the virtual chat, feel free to drop it down if you want to share that out. And yes, Martin, I do agree. Sprints are a lot of fun. Yes, Ohana Slack, it's great. It can be very overwhelming. So you need to be in the right channels and set your notifications accordingly. I will give that warning. But it is so useful when you have a question. I mean, it's global. People are I feel like I almost always get a response very, very rapidly. So that link should be an invite to Ohana Slack. All right. So just to wrap it up, being a habits hero means building confidence, trust, and long-term success, both for you, for your team, and for your end users. When they can see the habits from you over and over again, and you can help them build the same habits over and over again, you're building your team's habits over and over again. I think that just, again, builds a sort of confidence, and it helps people know what to expect. So again, even going back to building a system for requirements, making sure that people are knowing what you're expecting of them, and that, again, habits, this is true about life, right? The more you do something, the better you get at it, the more you learn, the better it's going to serve you. I would encourage you to think about one habit to focus on this month. And again, in the chat or in the room, if you want to speak up real loud, I'd be curious if anyone has either which habit you think is most important, or which habit do you think will be or has been most challenging for you?
Learn something every day is the most important.
Most challenging.
Yeah, of course, yeah, challenge. Yeah, documentation is a goodie. I always tell my team with the learning something, they're like, oh, it's so hard to find time for learning. And I often feel like, take whatever request or ticket you're working on now and think about what would it look like to spend 10% more time on this to add in learning. So if you have to build a flow, like can you spend 30 extra minutes going and looking at a video or a YouTube clip or a Trailhead module, something that is new that maybe you do or don't use for that request, right? But building it into the thing that you're working on is a really great way to get to that, learn something new every day. Of like, what is the 5 minutes? What is the 30 minutes? And there are some people who are like, if I'm not sitting down for 2 hours consistently, then it's not going to stick. That's fine too. Then build it out in your calendar and make a habit of it. But yeah, I think that just in technology in general, we just need to stay in tune with all the things. Yeah, and I agree. I think documentation, to the point earlier, like keeping it up to date, I think is the hardest part. But it's also the place where I see the highest return often. And so it's like, it's important, and you have to sometimes keep reminding yourself over and over again that it's important. All right. So I have some resources in here for you too. Rock Your Role as a Salesforce Admin is a great book from Jody Herbeck. She goes into detail about a lot of these things. I read her book, I think, last year, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, these are a lot of the same things that resonate with me, things that I've learned over the years. So if you're a book reader, definitely check that out. I mentioned Salesforce Architects, so Well Architected. If you are an admin that has never looked at that website because it says architect, not admin, I encourage you to go check it out. I think that gets more at the ownership mindset and the champion mindset than just being someone who's delivering things. I think there's a lot of things in there that are true. And even, again, as someone who is experienced, I go in there and I skip over some things that are over my head or not applicable, but there's still a lot of really great content. The Architect Mindset is another great book that I think is applicable to really anyone in the ecosystem. Becoming more agile whilst delivering Salesforce, can talk a little bit more about like related to DevOps and being agile. Time management for system administrators digs a little bit into like how to build out that system. It is a much older book, and there's parts of it that are very clearly dated. So I will also give that caveat, but I did really enjoy it. And of course, the Salesforce admin's website. And then in addition to sandboxes and testing, I also have a session that I did once on how to manage how to master your time management as an admin, which also talks about that a little bit about the building a request system and how to deal with things. So I want to say thank you, and we'll open up to Q&A. I also, as I mentioned, have would love some feedback. This is the first time that I've given this presentation, and I am giving it in person at Florida Dreaming next week. And so I would love, if you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Any feedback you have. It's, I think, only 2 or 3 questions, so hopefully not too much. But yeah, if you have any feedback, what did you enjoy? What would you add? What was missing? I'd love to hear it. But yes, we can open up to questions if anyone has anything.
I will start, and everybody can give some time thinking. So first question for me is regarding, like you mentioned, about the certification. I feel like nowadays, like so many certifications like pop up, brand new one. This question probably is asking for everybody a little bit newer in the ecosystem. Which certification will be good started as a beginner?
Yeah, so I think for most folks that I know the content around, I think that like admin, they've changed all the names. Whatever the first level of the admin certification is a good one. They do have an associate one as well. I have not taken that, and so I can't speak to exactly what's on there. That might be appropriate for some people as like an easy in. I think one of the biggest learnings for me was that like I did the admin one, and then I think there was a platform app builder after that. And then I thought I was done because I was like, well, everything else is architect or developer or all these other things. And that's where then I was working on a project related to experience sites, and I had to figure out how to like share experience sites. And so I used that project as a catalyst to then go study for the sharing and visibility certification, which is actually my favorite one. And so I think thinking about what I will stand on a soapbox forever about is don't get certifications for the sake of certifications. If you're a good test taker, you can fly through them, and that doesn't mean that you know the content, and you're gonna fall flat on your face if someone asks you to then do that kind of thing in a job. So I like to always, if I'm working towards a certification, try to have something in my own work that kind of goes parallel to it, to really dig into it and sort of like learn the content, not just according to the exam guide. So I am often like overstudying for exams, which for me is what I enjoy, and what I think helps me get the most out of it. And so I think as a beginner, again, maybe the associates, I don't know if anyone else has taken it and can speak to it, then admin, then platform builder. I think right now AI and Agentforce is all of the rage. So maybe go down that route. I did the first level of AI one, which I actually don't know if they have anymore. It was pretty straightforward as far as AI things goes. Like you need good data, you need trust, you need things like that. The second one is a little bit more in depth on Agentforce features, and so that might be more relevant right now. And then I think after that, it's sort of like what is relevant to the work you're doing. And if you are new to the ecosystem, I say this as a hiring manager, if you're new to the ecosystem and still trying to get your first job, I would say don't get more than like 3 certifications before you get that job. Because if you have a bunch of certifications and no experience and you come land in my hiring pipeline, it looks to me like you're just a really good test taker and you can read some content, but you actually haven't had a hands-on experience. I will take hands-on experience over certification any day. So I think there's a balance there with that. And again, that is Cassie's personal opinion. That is by no means like how everyone should think about certifications. But that's how I think about it.
On this subject, Casey, I have a question. In Chicago, it's your hometown. Is it now, these days, easier to get entry admin job than 10 years ago?
So if I just want to make sure I heard this, is it easier now to get an admin job than it was 10 years ago?
All right.
I don't have a clear answer on that because I think what being an admin looked like 10 years ago is very different than what it looks like now. So I think 2 things have happened. The amount of admin jobs has increased because the amount of organizations using Salesforce has skyrocketed. And also the expectation for someone coming into an admin role is also higher. And so it's a little like comparing apples and oranges from what I see. And I think overall the job market right now is really tough. Like I said, I haven't gone out and I haven't had a new job in 11 years. And so I think it also depends on your experience and it depends on your connections. So going back to the like always learning and stay connected, the one thing that I see consistently is people who are searching have a much higher success rate when they can tap people that they met at that meeting last week, that they talked to at that event, that can pull them in and say, hey, I heard you were looking, I have a job opening. And so I think that's where like networking and building real connections with people goes a really long way. And I think is what is part of the beauty of Salesforce, the Salesforce ecosystem, is that it's a lot easier to build those connections to get those ins to those organizations. And so not a straight answer, and I think some caveats to it, but that's kind of my take on the current ecosystem.
Yeah, from my standpoint, I'm running this group for 15 years at least. And 10 years ago, if I get brand new people who are certified as 1 certification or 2 as admin, kind of base knowledge of admin. It was very easy to, people will come and ask in the group, post something, say, hey, I need dressers. Do you have somebody who's looking or a change or whatever? We post it, people find job in a month or 2 or 3.
Yeah.
These days, it takes a year or more to get first entrance job. And Sometimes it lasts more than few months, sometimes it's not. And ecosystem is totally different. Definition of admin changed from my standpoint. And it's not clear anymore what is admin. You know,
Right.
This is what I'm seeing on the market and with clients. For some, admin is somebody like, smart kid in t-shirt who knows to click buttons and get something going. In others, it's whatever you were talking about today. It is admin, it's manager position. It is something that has high value for organization. And I'm not seeing that organizations see recognizing what is admin and they position it properly. And what is making this feel on the ecosystem that environment is changed. And if you go back to this Dreamforce that you visited, if I'm not mistaken, it was very little about admin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Admin, hey, admin will give you prompt. You don't need to do anything.
Right.
Just say prompt, blah, 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 and then go and fix all the errors that prompt is going to make for you. Without
Right.
doing what you just told us to do to be good at, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think Salesforce message is doing wrong message on admin position these days. What do you think?
I agree. The piece that I missed is also, so it's the change in expectations. It's the change in how many jobs are available. But there's also, if you think back, was it probably 4 or 5 years ago, there was a massive push for like, just become a Salesforce admin. It's so easy and it's such a great way to get into technology, which is true to an extent. And it flooded the ecosystem with people who wanted to become admin. I think the other thing that you're like everything is just called Salesforce admin, and some of them is more of a junior or an associate admin, and some of them some of it is more of a, I have managing director of blah 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 blah. But when I shorten it, I'm like, oh, I'm a Salesforce admin at the end of the day, which is only partially true. I still do some of those things, and so I do agree. I think it's changed, and I think part of it is. Again, the technology has become more complex. Our orgs have become more complex. I think a big part of it is security and having to think about how we build has become more complex. And I will say I have had conversations because I also run, and I'll drop this in the chat. So this is US based, but I do run a job board for like entry level jobs for people to get into the ecosystem. And I presented about this at a session a few years ago, and someone from Salesforce actually came and talked to me and was like, I think we're doing a bad job of getting people set up for admin. So someone, I don't know if it's a lot of people, but at least someone inside of Salesforce agreed that like they're not doing a great job of helping companies get the staffing that they need and helping to communicate that. Because what happens a lot is company buys Salesforce because Salesforce does a great sales pitch. And then Salesforce says, go ahead, go create your Salesforce team. It doesn't actually help them understand what they need. And so they talk to somebody else that just says, oh, you need a Salesforce admin. And then you get a job description that says Salesforce admin, great if they have Apex experience, must be able to build Lightning web components, like because they don't understand what they're looking for. So in a perfect world, when I had more time in my life, more than 24 hours in a day, I would love to also help companies write job descriptions for admin roles because I think a lot of them are garbage. But that is a different problem for a different Cassie at a different time. But I think that's the other part of it is organizations or companies that are getting Salesforce don't know better. And they don't know better until they hire someone who can actually do what they said they needed to do, or they hire someone that is like, you hired me to build Apex. I'm not creating a field. And so then they backtrack and then have to figure out who's going to go build that field. And so I think sometimes staffing Salesforce teams is hard. And I will say to the point, like, yes, I was at Dreamforce. There was not as much stuff for admin, but there wasn't a lot of stuff that wasn't just Agentforce, to be fair. But the one promising thing that I heard is a lot of times when they were talking about Agentforce, they were also talking about human in the mix. And so they were very good about always saying that their AI requires someone to like approve a thing or yes, give a good prompt. And so very few examples I saw were like replace the human. It was more about augmenting the human. I have my own feelings about AI, and they change every single day, and it's like an emotional roller coaster. But yes, I think Salesforce is figuring a lot of things out, and I think this is also where, like, if you see a job description that it says Salesforce admin and is requiring Apex, shoot them a message on LinkedIn and say, like, hey, admins don't do Apex. Like, I think you might be looking for a developer. Like, I have done, like, sometimes I get real, like, get off with my feelings about it, and I will do that to companies when I see something, because what do I have to lose? And so I would encourage you, if you do see that, like, share it out, because that's how, like, we have the control to help impact that. And yes, it's all very complicated and messy.
I feel like it's a natural evolution. Like I remember 10 years ago as admin, your job description pretty much is that you can create a field, you can manage a page layout, you can manage like a role hierarchy, you can manage you can create a validating rule workflow, which is required. You can roll the formulas. That's pretty much all you need to do as admin. But nowadays, because the technology advanced, right? You are expecting to understanding lightning page, dynamic page. You need to have a developer mindset to create flows, right? Basically, the if then condition and all the loops, especially inside the flow. Basically, it's just a whole different developer mindset nowadays. It's baked in as a job. It's just a natural evolution because the technology has advanced so much in the past years.
And I think it's also not just, you're right, it's the technology advance, but also that Salesforce just kept acquiring more and more companies. And so what was considered the Salesforce platform grew so much. And so companies still expect, well, you still support Salesforce, so now you learn this cloud. So, if it's like sales and service cloud, okay, that's kind of related. But, marketing cloud is an entirely different animal. And although now soon it won't be, yes, this can be melded back in. But anyway, but even then data cloud, I mean, all these different clouds are, additional, data architectures, entirely different sets of objects, and sometimes different tooling. So there's lots of learning.
Yeah. Also nowadays, last year or 2 years ago, Salesforce just acquired own backup. Basically, right?
Yeah.
It's a excellent tool, but you have to learn another thing like admin. Basically, it's how to manage the data backups. I will say it's a good thing, but so if you are in the ecosystem gradually learning, probably it's not that a burden. But as a new person coming in, it's just a mountain that has to be climbed at first.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder about that. I feel like, after over 10 years, I've just learned more and more, and so I just end up, having knowledge of all these clouds. But if I leave, I don't know if they could replace me with one person. It's just because I know so many things and I manage so many things.
Yeah.
I have told my manager very clearly, I won't say this about myself because I don't know, but I have a team member I've been there for 11 years. She's been there for 10 years. I was like, just so you know, if this person ever leaves, we need to hire 2 people. She's 1, super efficient at her work, and 2, just has learned so much about the org and about, the ecosystem and about Salesforce. I was like, and that has become because she has also sort of grown up inside of our org. But I am very clear about that. And I think that's true about a lot of people who've been inside. And I think it sort of goes to the staffing point of how you build out your Salesforce team matters. And, sometimes you've got business owners inside of other teams. There are organizations that have fundraisers who help dictate what should be in, their development team is the one figuring out what should be in Salesforce, and then somebody else is just clicking the buttons. And so again, there's just so many pieces to it. And then I think the other part that, we don't all have a ton of control over, but have some influence on is I think we also as organizations need to be better about hiring across all of technology, not just Salesforce, of hiring folks who are entry level and coaching and scaling them up, because the hope is that you get them to stay. And so you're going to get the benefit of everything they're learning to the point where you are getting 2 times of a person out of them because they know everything, they learn everything. And so there is something to say for putting in the time to coach somebody up inside the role within your org versus hiring somebody that already has the experience. The benefit there is you also get to influence them and build them with your habits and your best practices. And, you know, then you lose having additional insight coming in. So it's sort of a balance. You know, there's been times when I've been hiring where I'm like, oh yeah, I will hire someone net new. And then there was a time where I was like, absolutely not. I need someone who is bringing experience from another organization. And that is just dependent on where we are as an org. And I think that's true for a lot of companies. And so, but I do think that there are not enough entry-level roles in technology. And I don't think that they're all the entry-level roles that like AI is going to take. I think there's been a gap for this entry-level roles for a long time. And AI certainly is not helping, or like the perception of AI. You know, I hear constantly like AI is taking entry-level roles, and it's like, well, it can't take all of them, and it shouldn't be taking all of them. There's still a need in a lot of places for someone behind the keyboard, even if they're doing sort of entry-level things. Like, it's still beneficial to have a human there. Maybe that entry-level person can do more because they're using AI, but I don't think it's a perfect one-to-one replacement. Again, I choose.
Yeah, like I feel another thing is like in my experience is like anybody hiring for the to do Salesforce work nowadays by default, my current work and previous work, the default is you understand GitHub, you understand pull request, you understand pull request, you understand you have to understand metadata, right? You are able to read metadata
On the fly.
on the fly, exactly. That is like a totally different level, different area like to learn, which is like also like all the IDE too, right? VS Code and IntelliJ, like all this stuff. Yeah, so basically just so many different domains you have to understand, which is like nowadays is basic expectations.
Yeah.
You have to work with the whole team.
And it's not even on the job description.
Exactly.
Once you start working, it's whoa.
Yeah.
The whole new world.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
And you either get in the fire and burn, or you're out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the best way of learning, but you learn very quickly, and you become good, right, with time.
Yeah.
But it can be a painful process. And what Casey was saying is the job descriptions are very, very important. Like, that's the beginning, right, of clear understanding of the job roles, which in reality, the admin today, at least also when I was hired like an admin, but I ended up doing a role of a junior developer and admin, right?
Yeah.
And I'm still learning the developer world because it's big with Apex and all of that.
Yeah.
It takes years to learn.
Yeah.
And courses and real life examples of building the real thing, because you need the real life experience too, not only just study in Trailhead. Like, the real life work experience teaches a lot more sometimes. And I love what you said, Casey. That gives me a lot of hope. What you said, that you look at the experience of the people, right? Not only certifications. Like in my case, I'm working for certifications, but I haven't had the fortune to pass the exams. I do a good job in my real job. I've been many years in different companies, and they've been very happy with me. But I'm working on my certifications. I saw your profile in LinkedIn. It's like, whoa, you have so many certifications, girl.
I am a good test taker. I will say that with like all the standardized tests. Like, I've always been good at it. I used to be a teacher. I used to write practice standard questions. So like, and that's part of the reason I look at experience, because I know, like, if I wanted to, I could probably fly someone through some of these exams without doing a lot of studying. And like, that's not the goal, right? And so I think I also try to stand on that soapbox whenever possible to be like, there are people who are going to really struggle to pass these exams no matter how much hands-on experience they have. My coworker, who I mentioned has 10 years of experience, that I would need 2 people to replace her, she has 0 certifications. And so like she's got none.
And all these people with like you see them, no? And LinkedIn, there's so many certifications. It's impressive, right? And you're competing with them. So it's nice that there are some people out there that do see the work experience, right? Not only certifications. So it's both.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot. I said I would share my QR code for the folks who are in the room. If you want the access to the slides, want to take a quick screenshot or grab that. I will put that up because it's easier since you don't have access to the chat with the URL. And again, if you have time and want to share feedback, there is that link to the feedback in, I think, whatever the later slides. So when you go home or if you're taking a train or a bus home or however you're getting home, someone's driving you, hop on there and do that. And was anyone not able to access the slides? Or, oh, nope, I see people in there now. Great, perfect. Whenever I can see that one like anonymous, what do I have in here?
I will share the code with everybody. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, let me stop sharing. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? I love this. I love where this conversation has gone. This is the kind of stuff. This is why I'm still in the Salesforce ecosystem. I love this stuff.
Yeah, and this is why we are here and meet every month. I found this network very friendly, at least for newbies. Yeah, I still believe that ecosystem and Trailblazers will survive. It's just weird stage at this moment. This is how I would like to call it.
Yeah, I think as much as for all of the things that we don't have control over, and how Salesforce communicates things and blah blah blah, we can stop and think about the power we do have. We have the power of getting how many people in a room and on Zoom to sit here and talk about a technology platform and to share ideas and share best practices and have thought partners and things. And so I think sometimes we just remember, like, we have, here's what we can do around this, and here's the conversation that we can have. Sometimes even when there's other things where we're like, oh, I wish that other thing were different. We do still have some power in the game.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Cassie, for your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. And
bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I will, if you can, would you mind share the slides with us as well? And
yeah, let me drop that link one more time.
Yep.
Just post link.
Yeah, I will post in our user group community. So yes.
Great. All right. Have a good one, everyone.